What up, y'all? So, I want to give a review on the Picard series that they made. And I want to say that they definitely did do a good job on making it. Granted, there were some points that I was kind of not as sold on or I didn't like as much. But as a series overall, I actually did like. And I'll give the rating toward the end of what I thought of the 3 seasons they made. But we'll start with season 1. The things I liked about it on season 1 was I liked the ending where they kind of did a send-off for Data, because it kind of did mix well of Picard not actually really getting over Data's death, and it was kind of just stuck with them. And being an android, I can see how they can have his memory saved somewhere where it kind of made it where he couldn't die. And he wanted to be human, so it's kind of what he wanted to have Phil. So I kind of liked how they did the ending and how they set it up for season 1 with that. The second thing I liked was I liked the character development that they did in season 1 with Picard, Jurati, the captain that they brought in that drove the ship, and the Elnor, the Vulcan, or I believe he was Vulcan, and how they developed everyone with that. I thought they did a pretty good job on there. And also did like the fact that they brought in 7 and 9 to kind of bring the Janeway series and the Next Generation series together. I thought that was kind of a good touch, because I've always thought 7 and 9, even though she's been beautiful, I thought she was actually a good actor in her part as well. Some of the things I wasn't so sold on was the Vulcan aspect, or the Tal Shiar aspect. The storyline with them, for me, kind of felt weak, and kind of just, it really didn't pan out in the way I thought it was. So it kind of hurt the story for me, at least for season 1, of how the story went. Because by the end, I was kind of disappointed on the story. There was some emotional part, even like with the Picard dying and then being brought back as a synthetic. That was okay, but the Tal Shiar's being afraid of the synthetics, and I wasn't sold on that aspect of the story. So if I was just rating it as season 1 of what I thought, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10. Because season 1 to me was kind of a little disappointing, but it wasn't horrible. Now in terms of season 2, I did actually like season 2. I liked how they brought in how they kind of implemented the Terran Empire and what it could have been had things been different for Picard, becoming more ruthless and kind of showing them in a much darker light. I thought that was a good touch on an alternate reality to show why it was so important that they went down the route they did. Another thing I did like was I liked how they implemented a new kind of Borg, with Jurati eventually molding with the Queen and creating a whole new collective, one that was alternate and one that actually was more about society more than control, which I thought was actually a pretty good touch by them, because it introduced that there can be the possibility of a Borg link that isn't all about domination and assimilation, which I thought was a really good touch. And another one I did like was how they brought back Q and the way he was, where he was kind of the ominous, godlike, but it kind of showed more of an emotional tie to him with Picard, and kind of made a good clarity ending for the Q and Picard scenarios. I did like how they kind of ended that off, where it was no longer something that you would think. Now, in terms of some negatives I thought on it, was at the start it was confusing. It was kind of confusing on how they were doing it and what route they were going to go. And at the end, they did a good job of putting it all wrapped back up in together. But when you first started, you were like, okay, they're in the past. How is it going to change the future? And what is Q done? And all the steps going into it, it's like, okay, what's going to change in the future because of it? So, I guess in term, I guess you could say it's a nitpick. Because in the end, the wrapped up all the way around, it made it actually where the story of it was really well written, at least for that aspect. And it kind of shows like a humanity release in Picard that he wasn't willing to give at first. So, I mean, I do like the whole setup that they did there. But with how it ended there, it did kind of put a little staple for me on season 3 of kind of a letdown. Even though season 3 itself I really did like as well. I actually did like. But for season 2, I would give it probably like a 7.5 out of 10. I feel like they could have done more, but it wasn't really that bad, and I could see myself rewatching it again to maybe see stuff that I missed, because now I kind of have more of an idea of how it was going to go. But I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10. Now, season 3, this one, the one thing that I thought was a downside was on how season 2 ended. I thought season 3 would be kind of bringing in the next generation crew again, but then also kind of get a whole deal dealing with that new black hole that got created, because they made it sound like there was going to be an enemy in it. Now maybe that they're going to bring it out in a season 4, and Picard's really not that much involved in it. Maybe it's going to be part of the new cast of crew with Seven, Jack, and Rafi. Maybe they'll end up going that route with them. But I was kind of disappointed that they didn't really touch on it, because that was kind of the grand ultimate scheme of what was going on in season 2 in the end, and what it was all about. And then season 3 was just completely forgotten. When the Federation was being attacked, you never heard about Girardi. She never came out, which was kind of weird to me, given that she was protective and all that. Maybe it was under a deal that they were worried it might get assimilated as well. I don't know. But it was kind of disappointing that they kind of let Girardi and all them completely out of the picture in season 3, where I think they should have been involved at least in some way. Maybe even if it was just Picard asking for help and they said no because of a reasoning. But it is what it is with that. But for season 3 itself, the things I liked on it, and there's not a lot of things I actually didn't like, but the things I did like was, I thought it was interesting, the new implement that they did under Borg assimilation. That was kind of an interesting style. I don't know if it was realistic, But it was kind of an interesting styled take on it, where the Borg could adapt and learn to new techniques on how to assimilate without people knowing. Maybe it was when Janeway ended up beating the Borg Queen that caused her to have to do a new outlook on how to assimilate. But the weird aspect is it was set up in Picard even before Janeway, in theory. So that means that they had this plan all along. So for me, that aspect of it was kind of weird, but I did like it. It was kind of a cool little adaptation to it. The other aspect is that I also liked is I liked the new actors they brought in. The actor that played the captain for a couple of episodes, of kind of like, he was by the book, kind of a prick but skittish. You could tell he had like a decent heart in him, but he wasn't an open-ended person. He was kind of more hard-typed, but he was pure-hearted in the end. And I think even in the beginning, really, he just always played the role of act tough, but he was never never a full hard ass. He was just kind of a smart ass, which I can relate to myself. And it was cool actually seeing all of the next gen, like pretty much the majority of the Next Generation crew back in, and the Enterprise D being involved again. I did like that touch of them bringing it back after it had gotten destroyed and crashed into the planet during the one movie that they made dealing with the Kirk and Picard adaptation. And the aspect too is that I thought was interesting was them bringing in Jack, which I thought was a good connection that they had from season 2 to season 3, when they brought in Jack, and that actually ended up being Picard's son. I thought that was actually a decent little bit of a touch, because it kind of blended with him becoming more open, even though he kind of was still rebuttaled about it. But overall, I did like a lot of that. Now, the ones that I thought was kind of weak on it, but not like horrible, was the Changelings. That one they kind of felt a little bit more weak to me. If they had that much control of Starfleet, I kind of don't even know the point of why they even worked with the Borg. It didn't really make that much sense unless they didn't know themselves. But she was pretty much afraid of the Borg Queen, or at least that's what I'm going to assume was the Borg Queen when that was connected to her arm. But it was hard to tell, because she was hunting for Jack, but they never gave much of a story behind the reasons why. And they just pretty much forced everything out all in 2 episodes. So it went from being a build to being a race. So I think they kind of rushed the ending a little bit quicker than they needed to, where they could have probably made like maybe another 2 episodes of adaptation to learn. But it was what it was. Overall, for me though, I would rate it, I would actually rate season 3 an 8.5, 9 out of 10 for me, because I did actually really like it. So for the first 3 seasons, I would rate it probably a 8 out of 10, because there was some positives I liked about it, and there was some negatives I wasn't as sold about it. And ultimately, I don't know if they'll be continuing Picard or not. I think they were planning on leaving this as is, which would be a shame that they leave the black hole just wide open and not be covered at all. unless they're gonna do it, like I said at the beginning of the video, they're gonna do it with Jack, Seven, and Rafi. If they do that, then I'll understand it, and then maybe bring Girardi back in for them, or along those lines. But I would say Picard was a good watch. I've seen a lot of people giving it down talk because of saying it's woke and whatever else. I'm not that style of, I'm all about political and butthurt because there's a lesbian in it or a gay person in it, or I don't really care too much on that as long as you don't go into excessive. Like, there's some shows I've watched where they go too excessive, where they get a lower rating for me. But for this one, I thought it was a decent job, pretty good, but pretty good setup all around. So I would give it an 8 out of 10. But that's my opinion. Hope y'all enjoyed and have a wonderful day. Goodbye.